well, hang on. I just started the recording for this session. So again, the JobBuilder application is for automation of DemandTools scenarios. And for anybody new who just joined on, if you have questions, please type them into the questions area of the GoToWebinar control panel. And I'll keep an eye on that as we go through the session. And also, you don't have to wait for me to ask if there's questions. Just feel free to pump them out as they come to you. If it's not a good time for me to answer that particular question, I'll just table it until there is a good time. But every question that comes in, I will address. All right, so JobBuilder is our free scheduling tool. And oh, someone's asking about the recording. So right now, until probably the end of April, I want to say, recordings are still by request only. And then we will have them up and shared on a site where you don't have to ask me for it. So that's coming down the pipe, just not ready yet. So if you want a training link, I just ask that you log a case. And we're about to go out to our website anyway, so I'll just start there and show you. So at crmfusion.com, under support, there is open a technical case. And even if you don't qualify for technical support, you can still fill this out and ask for any of the public training sessions you want. Okay, so as I was saying, JobBuilder is a free application, and you can download it from our website. You can, if you click on any of the floating download trial buttons, or however you get to this page, you'll be able to get the free download. I know it says trial. They all start off as trials, and then we just flip it to active in the server. So here's where you grab it, and it does note that you have to have a specific version of DemandTools, and luckily all of our DemandTools upgrades are free, so you can get that version without much of a headache. You just have to download it. And JobBuilder can be used to schedule scenarios on an automated basis. It can also be used just for making the running of multiple scenarios, maybe that have to go in succession, a bit easier and less cumbersome for you. So rather than running 4 processes, you could click one button and those 4 processes will run for you. So we're going to look at both ways of doing this. Once you install JobBuilder, you get this little icon here, and you can double click to launch. Now for JobBuilder, you do not have any credentials to log in. Of course, when we use DemandTools, you're going to need those credentials, but to get into the JobBuilder application, those aren't necessary. And we're going to touch on how to specify which credentials are used in a scenario and which org it goes in. We're going to do that towards the end. So if you're one of those users who you're like, what, I just exist in one production org and that's where things happen, the registry part of the end of the training, you're more than welcome, of course, to stay for, because you may find use in it if you decide to pick up a sandbox or a dev org. But that's when we're going to talk about it. So in the beginning, as we go through this, we're just going to behave as if we all have one org that we want these scheduled scenarios to go into. And we're going to go through the interface. I'll tell you what all the buttons do and some of the shortcuts and things. So hopefully we'll make this as easy as possible for a Friday afternoon. Okay, when you first open JobBuilder, there's a couple things you need to do in order for it to work properly with DemandTools. And you're going to find that under Settings and then Configuration. So when you come in, this stuff here will be blank. The configuration file below, we don't ever foresee you needing to change that. This path here is not changeable, but it just lets you know where this file is. So you shouldn't have to mess with that. The top 2 are the ones that we want you to set. Let's start with the middle one, the DemandTools executable location. This is where we tell the system how to launch DemandTools. So what the DemandTools program executable, or where it is, and then the scenarios or the jobs that we schedule will tell it specifically what to do in DemandTools. So to grab the executable location, you can just click this, I call it the ellipses button, but it's the selection tool, I guess. And if you go to your C drive, which I'm not finding here, come on. There it is. You're going to have program files and program files x86. There are two versions of DemandTools, the 64-bit and the 32-bit. Their executables exist in different locations on your computer, so you can have both loaded. If you go under just program files, you're going to look for DemandTools, and you're going to see this is where the 64-bit executable is. All right, so I would go into DemandTools 64-bit, and then this icon here is going to be the executable. I can double click or click on it and click open, and it loads there. Yeah, I'll try to slow it down a little bit, but the selection, I mean, navigating through your computer, that's not really something I'm going to spend a ton of time talking about. We should all know where our executables are. So again, on the C drive, and just where it says program files without the x86, that's where the 64-bit executable will be. If you don't see one there, then that's a good indication you're probably running the 32-bit. The 32-bit executable is found under program files x86. And so you'll see again DemandTools, and you'll notice that there's not a bit denoted here, and that's because the 32-bit is, you know, the original way DemandTools was built. 64-bit didn't come around until a couple years ago, so that's why we don't have the bit denoter here. And if you log or click into there you have the 32-bit. Okay, so look how it says right here, 64-bit. Now if I choose this one, the 64-bit is gone, so, and it's under the x86, so that's how we know it's pointing to the 32-bit. Okay, I actually run the 64-bit, so I'm going to go back and grab that one. All right, and it'll tell you what version you're running to. If you're like, wait, I just downloaded a new version and it's not showing it, it might be because you haven't logged in and logged out of that new version of DemandTools. So if you do have to upgrade your DemandTools, log into it. After you've upgraded, then log out, and then choose your executable here, and it'll probably populate properly. The scenario directory, this is where you should select the location where you normally save your DemandTools scenarios. The default location that comes with the tool is under the DemandTools data folder. And you know, some people keep it there, some people don't. So wherever yours is, that's fine. We just want to choose that location. I like to keep mine under the DemandTools data because it's just easy for me to remember. And that exists under Documents, DemandTools data. And I don't go into any of the subfolders here. I want it to go to the top, and they'll just click OK. It'll read from those subfolders, don't get me wrong, but I don't want it to start in one of those. I want it to start at the top level. All right, so after download and install, go to Settings and then Configuration, and populate your scenario directory and your executable location. And if the scenario directory changes, you can always come in here and update it too. So it's not, I mean, obviously you saw I could remove and add it. And then that piece is done. And now JobBuilder knows for its default demand or default command of run DemandTools where that executable is, so it knows how to run it. Okay. Now we're focusing on DemandTools scenarios today. This is a scheduler though, so it can be used to do other things. You know, copy files from one location to another, start and stop processes. Those commands are all in there. And we're not going to really go over those today. We're going to focus on the DemandTools piece. But if you're a scheduling guru and you're like, well, I just want to kind of have one place where I do all this stuff, you might want to take a look at what the other options are for that. Another thing under settings, and this isn't such a big deal because it's not going to affect how jobs are really run, it's just what you see. The splash screen. So you saw that when I double clicked the icon and then it said JobBuilder and had that little pop-up. If you don't want to see it, you can turn it off. The toolbar is what we see here, where it says new job, new remark. I like having the toolbar there, but if you don't want that, you can uncheck it, and then those commands will be found under File and Edit. Okay. The other ones, this progress when processing batch and messages when processing batch, this is only applicable during a scheduled process. So if I run this manually, which I'm going to show you how to do, turning it on and off here won't have an effect. It's going to stay on regardless. This is just for, if you're scheduling something to run at 3 p.m. and you don't want all these process windows popping up at you, you can say, just keep them suppressed. And you're going to get a log file anyway. All right, so it'll confuse you, I think, because when we're doing this, you're going to see them pop up and you're probably going to wonder why my settings aren't honored. And it's because when we run it manually, these settings are not honored. So, and I didn't mean to sound snarky if I was like, oh, I'm not going to slow down. I'm going to try to go through this, at a pace that everybody can feel comfortable with, of course. That first bit with the executables, though, it's important. I don't want the training to be focused on how to navigate through your system. So if you're having trouble finding the executable, let me know for sure. And I know the person who asked the question had said they were good to go. That's great. I just didn't want to make it sound like you couldn't tell me to slow down if I needed to later on. Absolutely, tell me. Okay, so now that we're in here, now that we have it set up and we know how to execute demand tools, let's go ahead and just set up a job, okay? First thing you need to do is click new job. When you do that, let's look up here at the top, because this top portion is your editor of sorts, okay? You're going to be typing and making your changes up here. Down below, it's just showing you what the jobs are. Over here on the command, the default is run demand tools, because again, we want you to run demand tools here. We want you to automate your stuff, but you've got all this other stuff that you can do like a normal scheduler would provide for you. If you're like me and not interested in those things because all I do is run demand tool scenarios, then that's fine too. The file name for demand tools, because we're in run demand tools, we'll never manipulate that because that's all done in the configuration, right? The Salesforce instance. Now, this is the part that we're going to go into more detail towards the end, but just so you know, the default behavior is that it's going to run demand tools based on its last logged in credentials. So if I last logged into my demand tools through my sandbox, and that's where I have my auto login checked, that's where it's going to run the job. Okay, so if you're bouncing around from org to org, the end piece of this, working with registry files, I think you should probably stick around for. And then you can make the decision on whether you use it or not, but at least you have the knowledge. Okay, the parameter, this is where we tell the system which scenarios to run. And I'm going to take a moment real quick and go over to our help docs, which you'll get a follow-up email with a link to these help docs, but they're out on our website too. Demand tools scenario syntax. So there's some good notes on the top of this document that we're going to go through, but also if you're like, well, okay, I want to set up a mass impact job, what does that look like? Obviously, I'm not going to go through what a job looks like in every single schedulable module, but this document will. So mass impact, I think, is kind of easy to set things up with, which is good because mass impact is used for the data standardization stuff like states and countries and phones, and it's a great mass manipulator where those jobs, specifically those jobs, tend to be the ones that we can really schedule and just not have to worry about. So we're going to walk through a job. I'm going to give you some information about the parameters and just some general settings, but I want you to know that if what I said goes out the window over the weekend, it's all here in the help docs. So the first thing we do to select the scenario to schedule is I'm going to click my ellipses button and see how it goes to my demand tools data folder, and I set that in configuration. Now I just have to go down into whatever subfolder I want. So we're going to say mass impact scenarios, and I'm going to, not that you would ever do this, but anything where my state is OH, I'm going to change the country to USA. And you'll notice when I put in the parameter, it's surrounded in double quotes. Each parameter you use has to have its own set of double quotes encasing it, okay? And there has to be a space between parameters. For mass impact, you only need one parameter. So if we look here, required parameters, scenario file path. That's it. And that's what I've given to it. So you can see here, there's my file path. And that's all you need to schedule, well, to set up the job to be scheduled or run. Let me just look at the questions here. All right, nothing's out there. The other settings you have here, run mode, so this is sort of weird. Normal is how it was run the last time DemandTools was run. So if it was maximized, it'll be maximized. If it was minimized, it'll be minimized. If you want to specify how it is, you can do that. So if you're like, I don't want this popping up in front of me, I just, put it in my tray. Let me see it open up down here, and that's fine. You can do that. Or you can choose maximize. I'm going to do maximize just so we can see it today. The delay, this is really only applicable if we have multiple scenarios running, and it's asking you, well, what's the delay between scenarios? And for me, the best delay is just to wait till one ends to start another one. The reason I promote that is because it's never a good idea to have two scenarios running on the same sets of data. It can cause some issues in Salesforce with who gets access to the record, during those scheduled jobs. So I just say, these are going to process in order of succession from top to bottom. So just wait till the first one's done and then go ahead and process the one after. Let's go ahead and add another job. And to do that, I just click New Job. And this time, I'm going to do a mass effect scenario that is going to pull an export for me. Oftentimes, many of us have exports that need to be run, weekly or whatever it is, and this is just an easy way to do it. So looking back at our document, what do I need for a mass effect export? I need the scenario file path, and of course, the file path for the output file. That should actually say output file path. And you can see the example. So you have the scenario. The scenario will always be first, and then you'll have your files. I think that's noted up here. Yeah, scenario file path followed by the input output file path if needed. And then of course a space between file paths or parameters, and that each should be surrounded by double quotes. So this is actually the job I think we're going to set up, okay, the one that I used in the document here. Let's look at just these notes real quick on input and output file paths. Because our tool is able to work with things other than CSV, these are the file types that are available. When you are doing an export, you don't have to specify a worksheet or a table name if you're going out to Excel or Access. You can just get the file and it'll put it in sheet 1. If you're doing an import though, or using something for an update, upsert, import, anything where an input file is used, then the worksheet or the table name is required. Okay, so you'll notice if we were using this to do an insert, we got to do that, and then we have to tell it the file or the sheet name, and it could just be sheet 1. Okay, you don't have to rename them if you don't want to. And then of course we just remind you that worksheet and table names aren't applicable for CSV. All right, so let's set this up. I'm going to select my Mass Effect job. And then I've got to have a file path location. Of course, the file isn't there yet because it hasn't been created, but I still need the file path and the name of the file. So when it does create it, it has the name of the file and where to put it. I'm awful with typing in file paths. I can't remember this stuff. So I sort of cheat and I use the selection tool or the ellipses button. And let's say I want to toss this on my desktop. I'm like, all right, is there a file out there that I could just change? And there is. So I'll use this. Now, that's not the file I want it to go to, okay? Do I want it to be an SLXS? Yeah, that was just coincidence. I'm going to tell it, yes, I want it to go to the desktop. And so that's why I use the selection. So it got that part of the file path set up for me. And then I'm just going to change the name of the file. And now that other file is not even referenced here anymore. It was just my dummy that I used to get the file path set up. And then you'll see it set down here. Okay, and they do run in order that you've put them. So if you wanted to switch the order, you can drag and drop these if they're not too finicky. or you can right click and move down or move up. Okay. Another way to add a job is, as opposed to saying new job, is you can drag and drop. So if I'm in my file structure and I go to DemandTools data and I'm looking around, we'll do another mass impact one. I'm going to put the billing state in a long name. I can grab it here and just drag it up, and it copies it. I can do that with Mass Effect stuff too. I just have to remember to give it the file path parameter. So the drag and drop is kind of nice. And if I'm like, well, I don't really know what that scenario is doing, and I want to go directly to that scenario, I can say Edit Scenario upon a right click. And it's going to launch me into DemandTools. Now, that's assuming that you still have your auto login turned on, because whenever you schedule, of course, we have to have auto login enabled so it passes your credentials. And so I have that turned on, and it's loaded up the scenario that I right-clicked on. It's not going to run it, won't execute any changes, it just brings it up here. So if you want to make sure that it is the scenario that you want, or if no changes need to be made, you're directly there. And not accidentally maybe selecting a scenario that you think this is, but it actually isn't, and maybe just has a similar name. The nice thing too is if you have to make a change, you can update it, you save your scenario, and I'm overwriting what was there, and then JobBuilder is also updated. Okay, so there's nothing else I have to do there. Now, of course, if I wanted a different scenario, yeah, I would have to re-grab that. But because I was just modifying this one, I just have to do it here, and I don't worry about it in JobBuilder. We also have something you can use for organization purposes. It's a thing called a remark, and you can color code it. There's a lot of color coding in here, and we'll just make it. That's fine. We'll do that color. And this is where, in the parameter, this is where you freeform call what it is. So I'm going to say mass impact jobs. And then what I do is, move it down, move it down. So I know that my mass impact jobs are here, and I can have another one for my mass effect jobs. This is also really beneficial if you're running jobs in multiple orgs. So you can say, this is for client X, we're going to run these jobs, and then client Y are going to kick off, and you color code them so you know where you're looking in, in the grouping here. So I'll do another remark, we'll call, maybe this is just for export. My drag, there it is. My drag is just really finicky with me, so sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. On mine, and I think that's just my computer. But then this way, and let's make that a different color. Make you purple. Okay, so you can just have that nice visual indicator to see where things are instead of looking through an entire list and trying to read the parameter and figuring out, what it's doing. I think there's a question out there. Nope, maybe not. Okay, so adding jobs, hopefully that seems straightforward enough, getting it set up here. Don't worry, we haven't talked about the scheduling thing yet, so you haven't missed anything. We're just talking about getting the job set up, and then we'll move into either executing it manually or running a scenario or a schedule. All right. Now let's say this is, I'm fine, this is the 3 jobs I want to run. I'm going to save my batch. Okay, so jobs are the individual jobs, and a batch is, it could be one job, it could be multiples, but this actual thing is a batch. Okay, and a batch contains jobs. We'll go along with my clever naming convention here. Now that it's saved, I can do one of 2 things. I can schedule it, or maybe it's one of those things where I'm like, there's no schedule this has to run on. If finance calls and says this happened, then these are the things that I have to do. And rather than go into DemandTools and run this job, and then go in and run this job, and then this job, we'll pretend that we just started at the beginning of the day. You need to go in and run those things. You can open up JobBuilder. You can open a batch. And then you can click Execute Batch. And with the click of one button, all three of those jobs are going to run. Okay. In order for them to run, they do have to have the checkbox. See, this is popping up for me because I said to do maximize. So we see the lead export. And see, it's still running. But these checkboxes here, obviously they mean nothing for remarks, but for the jobs, if I uncheck those, they're not going to run. They have to be checked to run. And so since I unchecked them, it's like, oh, okay, we're done. There's nothing else to do. But on my desktop, I now have this one. And there's my export. Okay, now look at the name of this. It's added the date and time. I didn't tell it to do that in JobBuilder, so why did it do it? Because I have that setting specified on my scenario. So if your scenario says add the date and time to the file name, it's going to do that. You don't have to do anything in JobBuilder to accept that. It's just part of the scenario. Okay, so it'll always have your JobBuilder file name, but then if there's any appending that's going to go on because of the scenario, it'll do that during the scenario. All right, and here's those progress boxes I was talking about. These are the things that you can suppress and not have pop up if you were to schedule it. Okay, so let's say, yeah, I'm going to schedule this. I'm going to leave this one unchecked, and that's fine. You would click Schedule Batch, and then it brings up a little editor here where you can tell it the frequency. You can tell it the start date and the start time, and let's do actually, let's do 32. And then create the schedule. Yes, I want to save it. And now that button over here says scheduled and it's lit up as green. When you schedule something here, there is a job that is also created in the Windows Task Scheduler. This application takes out the need to interface with the Windows Task Scheduler, which I think is just incredibly cumbersome to get the file path and the parameters and just make sure they're right and in the right spot. That's the old school way of scheduling. So if you've mastered that, this should be a breeze. And if you haven't even touched on that, don't waste your time because this is much easier. And here it's starting to run. We should see, yep, there it goes. We're doing the lead export. And then it should jump and do this job next. And once we see that pop up, oh, here it is. So again, I prefer to have these done minimized just because I don't want this popping up on me when I'm doing other stuff. Okay, so let's go over to the task scheduler. Oh. So it's important to know that you still have to have access to the Windows Task Scheduler to run DemandTools, to run JobBuilder, because JobBuilder is interfacing with it. So if we look in our library, the JobBuilder jobs will all be listed under JobBuilder, and then it'll have the batch name. Okay, so that's the one we have now. Now, let me tell you this. If you schedule this batch, and then you say, oh, well, I'm going to move all my JobBuilder stuff, my batches, to a different folder. These will not run because it's hanging on to this location. We've had a lot of people encounter that lately just because they've been moving around organizing their stuff, and that's okay, but I want you to be aware of that. If you change a location of your batch or files that are being called in, just don't forget to update your jobs in JobBuilder. Now, of course, if that happens and you're like, oh, I don't want to have to update 60 jobs, just put them back to the original location and they'll start working again. All right, and also don't try to modify the job here, because certain settings we've suppressed in JobBuilder just at our first iteration of the tool. So if you guys have feature requests or you're like, hey, this is available in Task Scheduler, I'd really like to see it in JobBuilder, tell us, let us know, because this one, we're not done with it. We're always looking to make improvements. And of course, you don't have to have JobBuilder open for the scheduled stuff to run, okay? So if you want to execute it manually, then yeah, you got to open it up. But for the schedule to kick off, of course, just can stage shutdown. But you have to have, your auto login turned on for DemandTools. That's a must, or else how would it log in? All right, so I'm just going to take a pause here, and let's see if there's any questions floating around. And if I don't see anything pop up relatively soon, we'll just continue on. All right, now let's say you want to turn off the schedule. You come in, you open your batch, and then click Edit, Create Schedule, and you just slide the toggle to off and click Delete Schedule. And then in the Task Scheduler, let me refresh. You'll see that Training 16 is now gone. On the right click, you can also cut a job, copy a job, like I showed you before, edit the scenario, or delete the job. You can also start the job, so it would just be that job. If you are done creating this batch, and maybe you don't want batches for multiple clients to be in one place, or batches for multiple different orgs to be in one place, you can just click New Batch and start fresh. Let's talk a little bit about about the Salesforce instance stuff. So you can see in mine, I have a whole bunch of different instances showing up here. You guys are only going to have DemandTools as last logged in until you customize this. And this little button over here to the right of the dropdown is where you do the customizing. I'm actually going to delete that. And of course, you can color code here too, which is nice because when you use a different or a specified org, it shows up over on the right where my cursor is. And it's just nice to see, if you remember, not even so much what color each org is, just that it's jumping org to org because it's a different color. And these are reg files. Reg files are generated from DemandTools, so let's go over there. And that's what all these are. Okay, I have a bunch of different orgs that I log into for testing or whatever, and I don't want to have to constantly, just work with one icon that I've got to go in and change my login details for. Or maybe it's even like file paths or just different options I have set up in DemandTools. I want it to save it for that specific org and not have to mess with it again. That's what registry files do. And these look like the standard, they look like the standard DemandTools icon, as they should. But understand that when I go here, this goes to a completely different org than where this goes, and the settings are completely different. They don't have to be completely different. It could just be a difference of, which org we're going to. So it's flexible. And it's before, again, it was a little cumbersome to get these created. Now it's a couple clicks of buttons. So for you guys, you'd go to your regular DemandTools icon. Mine's going to auto log in, so I have to shut that off. And if you're going to use registry files, it is strongly suggested that you stop using the default icon because it absorbs the login details from the org you last logged into. All right. So if you're going to use registries, you know, if you're like, oh, I just have one for my sandbox, you're going to need to want to make one for your production too. And I know it sounds a little cumbersome right now, but it actually makes life a little bit easier. So in my options, I'm going to turn off auto login just because I want to show you guys from scratch how to do this. Okay, so let's do it again. All right, so you're logging into DemandTools, and you can either use the API login or the OAuth login. I like OAuth. I think it's just a little bit cleaner. And we'll do that. And before I do anything up here, and I know this goes a little bit out of order, you got to come down here and check your auto login to see how it made me go back and check my username again, or at least log in with a different username. So do the bottom settings first, and all I'm doing right now is auto login. And you don't even have to do auto login at that point. I just sometimes think it's easier. I'll show you where to do it in the options. And then log in. So now, under Edit and Options, I have all this stuff that I can set and make it specific to this org, and maybe it's completely different from my other orgs, maybe it's the same. But any settings you have here, under File Paths and under CSV File Options, are saved as part of this registry file. The important part we want to talk about right now is this auto login. So where it says auto login, that's the API auto login, because that was the original way that we could log into DemandTools. As of a couple years ago, we now have OAuth auto login. So this, whichever one you choose, will be dependent on the tab that you're using to get into DemandTools. Okay, so if you didn't do auto login when you logged in, you could just check it off here, and that will be saved. Under the File Path tab is where you're going to find the Export Registry Settings button. So you click that, and then it asks you, where do you want to put this? I put mine on my desktop, but you can put them wherever you want. And then I call it whichever org it is. And then I click Save. Now, when I go to my desktop, there it is. So when I double click this icon, it's going to auto launch me. It's going to pick up all those settings and log in for that particular org. So let me get out of here and I'll show you. This is my production org. Not something we want to use during training. But so it launches, it logs me in, and you'll see the org ID at the bottom. Okay. I've become very aware of my org ID, so I know that that's production, and I can see, you know, the different settings with username and stuff. If I double click this one, I'm going to go to a completely different org, and that's what's happening in the background in JobBuilder when you specify a reg file, is that it's doing this for DemandTools. It's seeking out basically which icon here to launch from. All right, and so my ID is different. My renewal time will be different. All right, my email address is the same, but that's fine. All right, and potentially what's under my edit and options could be different between those orgs. But right now, I'm logged into DemandTools pointing at 2 different orgs, and I can do 2 different things if I want to. That's what we're trying to facilitate in JobBuilder, and that's what we've done by allowing you to do these reg files. Now, if your reg file, when you save it, doesn't have that wrench, right-click on it and do Open With, and then choose DemandTools. Okay, it could look like this, and you might have, yeah, fine. Well, it could have that wonky looking icon. Okay, or I don't know, if it says to open with Excel, you'd probably see an Excel icon, but it's not going to work properly. So we want this to open with DemandTools. Any questions on generating the reg file? Only like 6 of you stayed around for this, but that's okay. Truth be told, we only had 11 on for today, but it's Friday afternoon. All right. Now, in JobBuilder, to set them up here, they're not just going to appear. You have to click this little icon, and you say New Instance. You give it a name and a color. We'll call this training org 2 since my other one didn't go away, and we'll make you okay. And then the path, that's your registry file path. So if you click the ellipses button, go out to wherever you saved that, for me in the desktop, and then you find the one that you want, select it, click open, and there you go. And that's setting up the instance. And then click OK. Now you can reorder these, so if you're like, well, I work in this org, more than not, you can move them up or down. So as you're setting up your job, or even let's say you set one up like I have and you want to specify which org, not just this DemandTools is last logged in, click on the job, see how it's loaded here, and then here, choose your registry file, and you see now how it says, okay, we know for sure it's going in this org. These guys would follow suit because it says DemandTools is last logged in. I don't like to leave that stuff to chance. If I'm going to specify it in one job, I'm going to specify it in all of them. I just think it's a cleaner approach. So right now, these jobs, it's going to log in here, log out, then it'll log into this org, log out, then log into this org. And it's only going to run the job in that specified org. So I know I do this a lot, so maybe that's why it seems easy or intuitive to me, but if it's not for you, I get it. Let me know, and I'll try to re-explain some stuff. You guys have been a quiet bunch today. All right. Well, I don't see any questions coming in. So that's the skinny on how to work with multiple orgs. It's not as intimidating as it used to be, or as cumbersome or time consuming. We want you guys to automate these things because there's so many jobs in DemandTools that you can do without actually doing them, just to keep your data clean. And it may not be one of the pre-built the system came with. It could be your own custom stuff. And, why not have something else do some of your work for you? So let me just show you here real quick, just because I like to see things, not just always told them. If I shut off the toolbar, see how it goes away? But you still have those commands. They're just built under File and Edit. But I like my toolbar. But that's pretty much it for JobBuilder. You specify the job. I think the pain point still is just making sure, and you'll get it after you've done this a couple times, is just making sure that these parameters are correct. And that's why I tell you this document I feel is invaluable, because you can really, it goes through every single thing. It gives you a nice example. Working with the registry files, that's also denoted here. And then we have a solution on how to create a registry file, because this is not new. And this link here will launch you out to the solution, which coming down the pipe, again, we should have this stuff. It's out on our website now, but we should have it in a more accessible manner, like where it might show up on Google searches. So before I let you guys go and give you back 12 minutes or 10 minutes of your day, is there any questions that you have, something that wasn't clear? You're not going to hurt my feelings, or if you're like, hey, start back here because I didn't really get this, that's fine. I'd rather have you guys ask me the question than walk away confused. You will get a training survey also after this class. If you have the time to fill it out, that'd be great. We just like to know what we're doing right or where we can do better. And if you have right now any feature requests or ideas, you can log those as cases and we make sure they get routed to product development. And again, coming in the future, we're going to have a place where you just go on our website and type them in and people can upvote and downvote and all that stuff. So it'll be fun. Oh, good question. So how do you know if it errors or stops working? I don't live in a land of errors. I just assume all my stuff works. The place you always want to check when you're running DemandTools is that DemandTools log file. That's going to give us more information than anything. The JobBuilder log file is also beneficial. So if something happens with JobBuilder and it's not working right, send us both. That would be great. So let me just show you DemandTools data and then log files. And let's see, what order are we in? Let's try this one. So you see how it says, well, that's the dedupe. We don't want to do that. Okay, mass impact, batch results. So the errors would show up here. I don't expect you to be able to look at this and understand everything that's going on. If you've been using DemandTools a long time, you probably got the hang of it. But if you don't understand it, send it to us, say this is what I was doing, and we'll start, diving into the details. Also, under JobBuilder data, you have log files. All right, and this is really right now, obviously, since there weren't any errors, just giving us where, what the parameter was and what org you were going to use it in. All right, so those two are the best locations to find that information. Good question, thank you. So I keep plugging this in different sessions. We will have more of a community feel, a place where you guys can go and interact with us, interact with your peers, share scenarios, all that stuff. It's coming. We're working on it. I'm excited about it. So hopefully it'll be launched in the next month or so. But the survey thing is something new too. So like I said, if you have the time, please feel free and fill it out. So unless there's any other questions, that's it for me, guys. That's all the detail. That's how to use JobBuilder. It's not as, there's not a ton of features to it, right? It's just a scheduler. So these sessions tend to end a little bit early. I don't want you to feel like you're not getting all the detail. But if you have questions, concerns, anything, reach out. Let us know. We'd like to hear from you guys. I'm going to tell you all to have a great weekend. Thanks for joining the session on a Friday afternoon. And hopefully we'll see you on some of our other sessions. If you want a recording, don't forget to log a case. If you forget that piece, then you email me. That's okay. I'll still get it to you. All right, guys. Thanks very much. I'm going to go. Have a good one.